Rainbow Six Siege is a game all about blowing up the enemy team, and sometimes maybe even your own team, as seems to be Fuze's speciality. However, despite the fact Fuze lacks an understanding of don't fuse the hostage room and you can't build heat-seeking explosive hockey pucks, he is completely stumped by the map plane. Note how I detonated my own fuse charge above myself, and the only thing that was damaged was Fuze's self-esteem. However, before I can get to the main issue being the plain bedroom ceiling, I will have to explain why this happens and the way it does, and maybe even clear up a few misconceptions about Fuze's cluster charge. To keep things short, there is an oversight between plane and how Fuze's gadget works, or perhaps in some places it might even be intentional level design, but that's for later. Firstly, we have to understand that Fuze's gadget doesn't release his pucks directly on the other side of his surface. Instead, there is a metal shaft that acts as a main method of delivery. Some of you may already know this, but personally, I thought it only showed up on thicker surfaces. This is a means to bypass most floors and walls of varying thicknesses. However, as we can tell, this doesn't work with every floor. Plane, as you may know, has many, and I truly mean many, oversights with its design and how the map itself is built. A perfect example of this being how this specific hallway ceiling is completely unaffected by breach charges or even ash charges. Note how the breach charge doesn't do anything at all, to me or the ceiling, and how these overhead luggage compartments are perfect for hiding loose hockey pucks. And how this ceiling has another ceiling directly above it that keeps the fuse charge from correctly penetrating through them. Now onto the dreaded bedroom defenders love to cozy up in. Now one might first assume the cause of these hockey pucks to bounce inside the ceiling to be a mere result of the charge being placed within indestructible metal struts, found inside all the floors in Siege and even some walls. This, however, is not true, as the charge completely ignores anything between it and the metal tube. It ignores these metal struts because of the way the charge unloads the pucks. The pucks, instead of travelling down through the tube, instead are spawned at the end of the tube and fired outwards in a horizontal fashion. So what is actually the cause? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple. The distance between the floor of the server area and the ceiling of the bedroom is too much for the poor Matryoshka. It simply doesn't have the length to reach the other side. This applies to nearly all of the other cases of this happening on the first floor ceiling, although the square ceiling tiles are more to fault of the double layer of ceiling combined with the tube length. Now I'll go over why this might actually be, at least for the bedroom ceiling, an intentional level design choice, as it means to directly nerf Fuze's ability to lay waste to the smallest objective room in the entire game. As we can see, when you activate the charge above the bedroom, a single puck explodes and the rest flow out in a downwards fashion into the room below. While the fuse charge does destroy itself and anyone near it in a 2 meter radius, it completely lacks the ability to fire the pucks horizontally inside the bedroom, giving the defenders much more room to avoid the pucks, although sometimes that doesn't actually matter at all. Another point is that this hasn't always been the case for this part of the ceiling, as during the time before Season 3, this ceiling was perfectly fusible without any problem. Here we have the same ceiling from a version of Siege back from 2015, and as you can see, the fuse charge has no problems doing its job properly. The same ceiling from the hallway also has no problems, even going through both layers of the ceiling, although you may note the device doesn't actually make a hole on either side of these ceilings, despite the device having that functionality. Speaking of which, the region charge not actually going through the ceiling was an issue back then as well. Now why, might you ask, does this version of Siege work as intended, while the current doesn't? It's quite simple. The distance between the device itself and the point where the pucks spawn has been reduced by about 2 to 4 centimeters in real world terms, meaning the device spawns the puck slightly too high for many of the ceilings in plane. In a slowed down video of the device spewing out the pucks, they can be seen spawning and then popping back up between the floor and the ceiling. Another interesting note is that the tube actually comes through the ceiling just like it did in the old version, but fails to make a hole just as the old one did too. Why was this change made? Why wasn't it ever mentioned, at least to my knowledge, and why was it never reverted? The reason the change was made was likely an oversight. As we know, at some point Fuze was buffed, and during that time it's highly likely that someone thought, that seems a little low, maybe we could just bump up the spawn point a little higher to be flush with ceilings. However, I'd imagine they didn't take into account that nearly all of plane's ceilings are lower compared to all other maps. And why wasn't it ever mentioned? That one may be a bit of misinformation on my part, as there's a whole year's worth of updates to go through. However, if it wasn't ever mentioned, it would likely be because it's such a trivial change, or maybe it was even a mistake in the first place. As for why it wasn't reverted or fixed is another question, as at this point it is common knowledge for most longer time players, including myself, that Fuze and plane don't go hand in hand, so it would perhaps be that Ubisoft devs likely didn't know about it, or had other stuff to do, and just didn't want to go about fixing it. Or maybe they didn't know what caused it. Well, hey, there you go Ubi, a fix for your strange bug that was, at least to my knowledge, completely misunderstood and unexplained. And hey, there you go, that's the video. I hope those of you who watched this found this video interesting, and maybe even helped in preventing further suicides to logic-defying pucks.